Welcome to the Sports and Stilettos podcast. Hello, everybody. I hope everybody is still staying safe and healthy during this quarantine time. I hope everybody is still staying home. Let's continue to fight this. Hopefully for the next hour, I can cure your boredom a little bit as we talk with Morgan Uber, the Big 12 Digital Correspondent. Morgan has had an incredible career in college. She actually worked for a professional team and then switched to the collegiate level after taking a hiatus for a little bit. She also talks to us about her first couple of months working for the Big 12, and Morgan and I have a lot of similar connections, which have helped us get to this point in our careers now. We talk about all of that in the next hour. I hope you enjoy this episode. Here's Morgan Uber. Morgan, first of all, welcome. Thank you so much for joining me. I want to check on with you with quarantine, how you're doing, how your family's doing.
Thank you, Rachel. Thanks so much for having me. And, we're all good. I'm actually in Dallas, Texas with my parents and brother living with them right now. And we're all doing well. We're staying positive and optimistic, and everyone's healthy in our household. But, it's been a crazy time. And, how are you and how's your family?
Good. Yeah, everyone is healthy, luckily. I feel very fortunate. I know some friends that have family members that have been sick, so my heart goes out to all of them too. And hopefully, we're just kind of, this will be the peak. I know we were kind of talking about before the call that hopefully this is our peak week and then it just goes downhill a little bit and we can hopefully get back to normal in a couple of months. But it's just been almost overwhelming and trying to figure out things to do. And I know content wise for both you and I, obviously, we're used to being in studios and talking to athletes and coaches. So, what have you been doing for the Big 12 now with being at home?
Right. I mean, I think it's so interesting during this time. It's an opportunity to exercise some creativity, but also, being respectful to kind of the, dynamic in this unfortunate time in our world. So at first it was kind of, really we were a little bit quiet that first week after, the tournaments were canceled and all of that. But lately it's been trying to find some sort of routine. We launched a content series, kind of putting out some big names that we think will get drafted here in this virtual NFL draft in just a couple of weeks. So we've been going school by school, posting some highlights, and then this past weekend would have been the Final Four. So we did a little bit around basketball, showcasing some of the big Final Four memories on our Twitter and Facebook. And then now it's with the NCAA ruling officially coming out last Monday on, these spring sports seniors having an extra year of eligibility. We're now able to kind of coordinate some interviews with those student athletes. However, that's also an interesting situation because really it's going to come down to those institutions and how much aid that they can give those student athletes. That'll 100% be, determined by those individual institutions. So these seniors may or may not get some of that aid that they've been receiving in the past. So it's not even certain exactly who's going to come back. So that's also been, kind of, it's been a lot of behind the scenes stuff really going on, for me right now in comparison to what I've been doing. But I actually set up a Big 12 step and repeat in my parents' living room. So big thank you to them. So I kind of have my new little home studio launched and ready to go for when we're able to start doing some of those interviews.
Thank goodness for mom and dads, right? Like,
Yes.
we can completely just take over their house and be like, sorry, mom and dad, like, love you, thank you.
They've been all for it, and it's with four of us working in the house right now, it's been, we have to kind of coordinate conference calls and coordinate different people's schedules. So I think a lot of this time has been learning to be patient with one another, which I think is an important thing that we can all really take from this.
I think patience is going to be a big thing, and I think even being in like the house, but also just life too. I feel like I'm learning so much about being patient and just like being in the moment and trying not to get anxiety. Because when you kind of think about it, like, we don't know when this could possibly end. Like, I don't want to be negative, but this could be only the beginning, right?
Right,
China right now
exactly.
seeing like a bounce back. Like, are we going to have that too? So I think trying to be staying in the moment and being patient and just remaining calm during all of this is very good and definitely something I'm working on constantly. It's been a crazy time and so overwhelming, but also everybody's in it together. So I feel like there's that bit of togetherness.
Yeah, I mean, I think, we talk about, different ways to kind of calm that anxiety. And for me, it's been, trying to find some sort of routine. So, during my week, Monday through Friday, I'm still waking up at an early time, not necessarily the 5 a.m.s that I was doing, before all of this hit, but, I'm waking up early to still get in some sort of exercise before I sit down and start my day at 8:45. And then, I've been bookending my day with cooking dinner in the kitchen with my mom every night. So, I think finding some sort of routine, during this time has helped me. And I'm sure people have heard that time and time again. But even if it's just one or two things that you're doing, every day, I think that's been what's helped me the most.
First of all, you get up at 5 a.m. when you work regularly, like in studio?
Normally, yes,
Morgan, how?
well, my whole house does. So I really don't have, they're all up and at 'em at the gym. We all go to the same gym, my parents and brother. So we are morning people, I guess. I like to get my workout in, before the rest of my day sort of takes over. And I like, in sports we work late, so sometimes I'm not getting home until 6:30, 7, 8 o'clock, or if I'm working a game, it could be midnight. So trying to knock it out in the morning is always, the best practice for me. I know everyone has, their different ways of doing things, but I like the early morning workouts for sure.
First of all, that is so impressive. I am not a morning workout person at all. I remember being in high school and trying to do workouts in the morning, and I was like, oh my gosh. So, major props to you there. You said you were cooking with your mom, though. Have you learned any good recipes that you'll hopefully just like carry on with you?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've done, a lot of sheet pan type recipes. I've looked up a whole bunch of Trader Joe's. So we have, a few Trader Joe's around us, and we're a big Trader Joe's advocate family. I think they have a lot of great recipes they've been sharing. So we've done some sheet pan recipes. We've done a lot of Mexican, so different fajitas, and
Oh, love
trying to stay
Mexican.
pretty healthy, but also, just, a balanced diet, not worrying too much about counting those calories these days, and really just, and enjoying, all of the time together. And I feel fortunate to, be with my family right now, having lived, 2,000 miles from them, 3.5 years when I was living up in the Northeast. I've really only been at home for about 4 months now, back in Dallas. So it's, for me, I'm taking advantage and really loving this time with my family.
Let's talk about your job with the Patriot League being up in the Northeast. I've never been up there personally. So, what is the atmosphere like for sports?
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot different, right? Like growing up being a Texas native where football is basically everything. Don't get me wrong, they have big football up there, but I think, up in the Northeast, it is lacrosse. Lacrosse is the number one. I mean, you see it at the youth level, and then all the way up through college. Obviously, the Patriot League, it was one of our premier sports. So Loyola, Maryland, they were national champions, actually right before they joined the Patriot League in 2000, in like 2012, 2013, in that time frame. So lacrosse was, I actually played it in high school, so it is decently big around the Dallas area, but nothing like it is up there. And then Patriot League is FCS football, so it's not, your typical what you think of, what I'm covering now, your Oklahoma, your Texas, your Iowa State, those big, big stadiums. But it was so much fun to travel to those college towns, and, every one of them was so unique and different. And I found my favorite spots in town that I would always go to, the Friday night before a game, and get dinner. And I got into these routines, especially, with our TV crew. We had our favorite spots when we would travel. But, you also had to plan accordingly for winter travel, which I know you're used to out in Colorado. But for me, that was kind of a new territory. So sometimes I'd have to take a road trip. I'd have to leave a couple days beforehand to get up there for a basketball game up to Holy Cross, which was about a 4.5 hour drive. And I might have to wait out the storm and stay an extra night in a hotel. So you had to be flexibility. You had to have that flexibility with your travel for sure. But yeah, I was there for 3.5 years and enjoyed every second of it. And so much of what I did there prepared me for now what I'm doing at the Big 12.
You did a lot of sidelines with Stadium up for the Patriot League. What was your craziest game that you did?
Ooh, that's a good one. Craziest game that I did. I would say, I really loved going to Hamilton, New York, which is where Colgate University was, and covering their football team. They had won back-to-back Patriot League champions 2 of the years that I was there. And they had a lot of good games. I'm trying to think, like, pinpoint one that really stands out. I would just say, really anytime that I worked a game there, they had such a unique fan base. I mean, it was a tiny town of Hamilton, New York. I mean, it was considered a village because it wasn't even big enough to really be considered a city. But just the amount of people that would come out, I mean, it was parents that would come watch, their sons from all over the country. So, it wasn't not necessarily one crazy game that stands out in my mind, but I think it's, those environments. Also too with Colgate, they hosted a Patriot League basketball championship game last year against Bucknell. That was that was my last basketball championship with the Patriot League, and that was a crazy game. Anytime Bucknell and Colgate played each other in men's basketball, that you just knew that was going to be a good game. So there were a couple of those during my time. So I did a lot of basketball and football sidelines with Stadium, for 3 seasons. And, it's crazy to think back to my very first game with them and all that I learned, and, working with, I had the same play-by-play guy for most of those games over the 3 years, Matt Martucci, who taught me so much, and Dave Owens, our color analyst, and I still keep in touch with those guys, and really owe a lot of, where I am at and what I can do now because of what I learned from them.
Obviously, the post game interview is a beast. And when you're first coming out of college and you're getting new jobs, you are like, I need to have the best questions. When you are lining up questions in your head for post game, how do you kind of let them flow?
That's a great question, and I think that's something that no one really teaches you in school. It's something you kind of learn either by doing or after the fact, working with great mentors like Jill Montgomery, who we both work with, and we
Incredible woman.
Dive into more of her later. But specifically to your post-game interview question, I think always looking at that turning point in the game, the big moment, the big play. Obviously, a buzzer beater game, sure, you're going to ask about that last moment. But, in a football game, if it was, a third quarter, 4th-and-1 defensive stop, that's a great opportunity to ask a question if that, completely turned things around and gave some momentum to the offense. So I think it's always looking at, specifically going micro, finding that one moment in the game, and then kind of going big picture. So always starting kind of with your X's and O's type questions first, and then working out into your more fluff sort of questions at the end. And I think it's all, it's repetition. It really is, and finding your voice as a reporter.
Now that you've been doing this for a few years, do you find yourself still getting nervous, or have you kind of figured it out, gotten in your groove, and now you're just able to do your job without having to worry?
Yeah, I think when I am doing a game every week, like I was at the Patriot League, I really was able to get into a routine, and the nerves, by week 3 kind of had settled for me. But now I just did our indoor track and field championship about a month ago, and I hadn't really done a live broadcast like that in a couple of months. So there were a little bit of nerves in probably the first, 10 minutes or so of the broadcast. But once you settle in, for me, I think I've gotten to that point in my career. I've had enough reps, I've had enough practice, I've had enough, learning through different mentors that I've really become confident and found my voice, and the nerves go away at that point.
We talked a little bit about Jill, and one of the major things Jill has pounded into my head is no yes or no questions. I'm sure she did the same for you too.
Yes.
How do you, sometimes I feel like you have to ask a yes or no question, but it's figuring out a way to change the question so that it's not really yes or no, right?
Right, exactly.
How do you go about doing that?
So I actually, it's funny. I have my Jill Montgomery Four Leaf Productions Bible sitting right here in my little makeshift office at home, right in front of me, that I refer to, all the time. And I think, it's literally been so ingrained. I've worked with her now for almost 2 years, and it's so ingrained in my head to not ask the yes or no question that for me, I don't even have to think about it anymore. But really, I think it's just going back to the basic of what is a question. A question is who, what, when, where, why, and how. So, beginning every single question that you ask with those words will get you out of that sort of yes or no predicament of wanting to ask that yes or no question. So that's, every time that I'm writing a script, whether it's an interview, typically it's the interviews that I'm doing in studio. If I'm doing a sideline game, I don't have enough time to write out that at the top of my paper, but I still will start my scripts in studio if I'm interviewing. I had Scott Drew on a few weeks ago, Baylor head coach, and before I wrote out my questions for him, I wrote, those 6 words at the top of my paper to help me formulate good questions around those words.
It's for Jill is incredible. First of all, if you are somebody who is in sports broadcasting, definitely reach out to her because she has helped me tremendously. Another
There's no
woman.
one. Oh, go ahead.
No, go for it.
I was gonna say, I mean, you need that constructive criticism in this industry, and I think there are very few people that are gonna give it to you, especially when you're first starting out. I think now even my mom has kind of become this second coach on me, and has really been able to pick out some things. But I think Jill, especially, it's putting your feelings aside and just being able to take it has made me so much better, and I'm sure that all of her clients would say the exact same thing. I'm sure you've had a similar experience in that tough love that she gives us.
It's tough love, but you also know that it's love. Like she
Right.
cares so much and she wants you to do well. That's why she's so hard on you, which like you kind of mentioned, you can't always find that in this industry. A lot of people won't give you criticism. They'll be like, "Oh, you need to work on this or this." And I feel like for the first couple of years of my career, I wasn't really getting any better because nobody was like they were telling me little things. So I would change that, but they weren't telling me the big things that I needed to work on.
Right, 100%. And in order to get better, I think sometimes you do have to hear it from other people, because that's the only way to kind of get outside of your own head and improve. And continuing education in this industry after you've graduated is just as key as, the learning that you've done inside the classroom, I think.
That's so true, and I think you never stop learning in this job.
Yes, that's why I love it. I mean, that's why every day, challenge yourself to learn something new. That's what I have a post-it note that I tell myself. I read that every morning when I get up, and it's something that I've sort of lived by, even really before I had graduated from college.
Another person we both know in the industry that kind of helped us get into this is Laura Oakman.
Yes.
And she runs Galvanize. She helps a lot of women who are just kind of getting their start into the industry. What boot camp did you do, Morgan?
So I did the Falcons boot camp, and it was 2 years ago down in Atlanta, Flowery Branch, Georgia. With the Falcons, interviewed Dan Quinn, and we had our rookies, and the sisterhood. And I'm sure you can speak to this as well. The sisterhood that was created through that experience, through that boot camp. I mean, I still keep in touch with so many of those young women, and it's been so much fun now that we're a couple years removed from the boot camp that I did, just to see everyone's journeys and stories and where people are now in this industry. I think so many of the women that I was with are now in new jobs and new roles, and it's been so much fun to just see other women grow. And when you can kind of take out that competition factor and viewing other women as your competition, but rather replacing it with kind of being a support system and being cheerleaders for one another, I think that's when you've really risen to that next level in the industry. Because, and I think Laura has said this in all of her boot camps, but there's enough jobs out there for all of us, to be able to get with this digital space and being able to root for the other women in this industry. I mean, that's a really, beautiful and powerful thing.
First of all, it's so funny you went down to Atlanta, because that's where I did mine too. But I
Oh,
think I did
nice.
mine 3 years, and I guess it's outside of Atlanta. But yeah, I did mine with the Falcons too, and it was 3, maybe even 4 years ago now.
Wow. So you were like
Gosh.
one of the first. I mean, right? Was that kind of the
Yeah.
first go around?
Gosh, I'm trying to think. Were you? Well, no, you talked to Dan Quinn, huh?
Yes.
I was gonna say because I did it before they did it with like players, because now they
Okay.
match players
Yes.
together with
So
reporters.
I was probably one of the first groups then to do the rookie,
Okay, so
the
you did
players.
have a rookie
I
one.
did. I
Okay.
did. Yes.
Yeah, so I think they did that the year after I went.
Okay. Yeah. I mean,
Gosh.
it was so much fun to not only hear like all the other women's stories in the room, but hearing the players share their stories, and it really just links everyone that in the room, that everyone has these unique stories. Everyone has come from somewhere. Everyone's faced some sort of adversity to get where they are. And, you just really felt this strong emotion in the room when we were doing it with the players. So, yeah, I mean, that's definitely been one of my highlights in this career in terms of just connecting with, not only Laura, who's like literally, a goat in this industry for sideline reporters. She's one of the best women to look up to in the industry, but just the other, young women in the room, that so many of us are, on the same page and fighting through the same sorts of issues. And we still have our group me. Do you guys still communicate in your group text?
I don't think so. Gosh, I'm trying to think. I helped out a little bit last summer, like
Okay.
setting up boot camps, and I'm still a part of one of those group me's, but I don't think of the one that I did 3 or 4 years ago.
Okay.
Gosh, I'm trying
Yeah.
to think. I can't remember. I feel like I'm getting old, Morgan. It's
I know.
scary.
I feel ya.
But one of the things that Laura says that stuck in both of our heads is reach out to someone 10 times, but only ask them for something once.
Mhm.
When
If
you're
I
trying to, I guess, when you look at that statement, you're like, okay, I don't want to bother anyone though. Like, I'm sure they really don't want to talk to me. At least that's how I thought in my head. When you're reaching out to somebody, not to ask them something, what are you reaching out to them for, Morgan?
Well, I think I think about a couple of the mentors that I have in the industry who I've gotten to really know on a personal level over the past few years. And, for example, one of a producer at ESPN who I've gotten to be close with, his wife had had a baby. And so I reach out to him all the time and I'm asking about, his new baby and their family and how they're doing. Also during this time, I'm asking just how people are doing. I mean, if anything, this is a great time to be really connecting and just reaching out to people, because, the simple question I think is just, how are you? But I think, it's just getting to know people on a deeper level than just what they do for work, and finding out what they're passionate about and what their hobbies are, and making those little connections and picking up on things and remembering them, and just small talk. I think, because listening is such an important part of what we do as reporters and broadcasters. If you can remember a few little personal things about someone and tie it into an email before you're asking them for something, that just, it goes a long way. I think it's a lot harder said than done, and I am by no means perfect at it, but I definitely try and live by that. I don't, I think early on, women and even young men too, reporters will send their reels out and wanting, different critiques, and wanting to hear from people. But I think before people send out their reel for a critique, you should just pick up the phone and maybe just get to know that person before you're asking them to spend 10 or 15 minutes doing you a favor. So I think that's probably, if you can even just do it 5 times before you ask for something, I think that's a good place to start.
That's very true. And I think too, even if you do send off your reel, you and I both feel this way that we are very lucky to be in the positions we are. We have jobs that we love, and we get to be in sports. But we've also had a lot of no's in our careers, and I don't think people always acknowledge that. Would you say that's an accurate statement?
Oh, yes. I mean, I think the no's are an important time of building character, if you will, and almost bringing you back down and humbling yourself that, hey, maybe you do have a long way to go, and this really is a journey, and it's not a race. And there are, you're getting those no's for a reason. Maybe, you just aren't the right fit for that position. And I think sometimes, like, don't people can't take it personally, but also you have to get that experience. And I get it's frustrating when you're first starting out because you just want someone to give you that first yes. But I think when you get that first yes, it's so important to take complete advantage and just dedicate everything you have to that position, because there were probably anywhere from 50 to 150 applicants or more that applied for that position. So just I think I've found myself, in my job with the Patriot League, in my job here at the Big 12, just realizing how fortunate I am to be in this position, and every day waking up and dedicating myself to it, knowing that I'm very privileged and lucky to be where I am, but only lucky because I've put in that hard work, that comes from experience.
Very true. However, you almost have a different kind of story from when you graduated from Mizzou. You went straight to Fox Sports Midwest and covered the Royals, a professional team, and then you had a little bit of a hiatus trying to find a job.
Yes. So it was my spring semester. I was a senior at Missouri, and I think this is another good lesson for people through this story was, we had received a email from our news director at KOMU, which is the NBC affiliate in Columbia, where we worked as students, as real life reporters. And that email said, "We're looking for someone to collect sound in the Royals clubhouse for the 2015 season." And I think, he blasted that out to our entire senior sports class. And I think I was literally the only person to apply and respond back saying, "I'm interested." Because when you think of collecting sound, I think people thought it was going to be a 100% behind the scenes type job, just shooting, holding a microphone, working the mic, and, no on air reporter experience. Well, because I had just inquired a little bit more, they had invited me to St. Louis, which is where Fox Sports Midwest is based, for an interview. I ended up getting the job, and I started opening day. So it was April of my senior year. I still had 2 months of classes, and I was still a full-time student while also working this full-time job. And by the end of the season, I had actually turned into more of a reporter, getting reports from the clubhouse in the post-game show that I would give, because I was the only one from Fox Sports Midwest that was in there. We had our pre and post game hosts that were up on the desk that were in the outfield, but I was really the eyes and ears in the clubhouse. So it was an incredible experience. Obviously, that was the year the Royals went on to win the World Series, so I was a part of the amazing parade in Kansas City, which is that's a once in a lifetime experience. So really what turned out to be, a situation no one really else had applied for it, didn't really know what the job was. I think my piece of advice would be apply for everything, apply for every job out there, because you never know what it can turn into. But I think my more important lesson too also comes from after the fact, after that magical season, that dream job ended for me. It was a 1-year contract that I had signed, and they decided the next year they were eliminating that position. So my contract was, not renewed, and I came back to Dallas and I lived with my parents. And in the meantime, I had what I thought was a solid reel from that season that I had sent out to some local television stations. I sent, and, really to everyone, whether they had jobs or not, was just trying to get some feelers out. And it was really hard for me to land that next job. I lived at home for about 6 months, and I worked really random jobs. I was like a front desk assistant at a hot yoga studio. I was a front desk assistant at another workout gym. And it was kind of a reality check for me, and really just through the process, I stayed really positive, although it was hard to at times. But looking back on that situation, it really just shows you that the job that you get is the job that you're meant to be in for a reason. And I waited it out. I waited till that right opportunity, and then the Patriot League job became available, and I applied. And really, that was another job of something that I turned it into a position that was different from that original job application, and that original, when they had read off the duties and responsibilities, I was able to add a lot more to it than what they had originally intended for that position to be.
First of all, how in the world did you manage a full-time job with a professional team and being a full-time student?
Yeah, well, I have to give a lot of credit and thanks to my professors during that time, who were very understandable with me missing class. So I was only working home games for the Royals, but that's still, 80 plus games that I was working. And so during that stretch, it was actually my college graduation coincided with one of the home games. And it was a series against the New York Yankees, and I was like, oh, of course, like, wow, what a great series that maybe I'm gonna have to either miss my graduation, or I'm gonna have to miss these stretch of baseball games. So my boss at Fox Sports ended up letting me off, and I was allowed to go to graduation, which I was very excited about. But it was tough. I was driving back and forth between Columbia and Kansas City. It's about 2 hours. So I would go, and some days most days I'd get to the ballpark around 3 o'clock, and then most games weren't ending till 10:30. So by the time our post game show was wrapped up, 11:30 p.m. And then I was driving 2 hours back to Columbia, and then going to my classes at 8 or 9 a.m. So it was a tough grind, but it was only 2 months that I had to do that, and then I was able to move out to Kansas City and finish out the season actually living there, which was like a luxury to only have a 15-minute drive to the ballpark once I moved out there in mid-May. But it's it took some balance, and also the understanding of my professors as well, which, yeah, very grateful for.
You have a kind of a lot of history in Kansas City now with the Royals, obviously, and then being there for the Big 12 tournament and all of this coronavirus stuff went down. What was it like being in Kansas City and being at the arena and experiencing all of that?
Yeah, I mean, it was, 24, 48 hours that just went from, we were taking every precaution possible, to the tournaments ultimately being canceled. So we flew out there on Tuesday morning, and I remember on Tuesday, it was bad enough at that time that I had brought my Lysol, I had brought some Clorox wipes, and I was wiping down the airplane trays and seats and everything like that. And we got to Kansas City and got to the Sprint Center, and our first round games were on Wednesday. So those 7 through 10 seeds were practicing on Tuesday. And they were putting a lot of restrictions in place of we had to be pretty far away from coaches that were being interviewed, so they would put them up on the media table. There were no one-on-one interviews allowed or anything like that. They had Sprint Center staff that were coming down and wiping down the chairs and the courts after one team left the court. So I mean, there were a lot of precautions in place, and at that time it was like, wow, like we're really doing everything possible, and this is great. Everything's still going to be able to go on. And then it was Wednesday when really everything hit, and the NCAA had announced they were going to play the tournament without fans. And so then the Big 12, we also came forward and said, our Thursday through Sunday games were going to be played without fans. However, those first round games were Wednesday night, and we were making that announcement about 20 to 30 minutes before those games were being played. So there were already fans in the stands for those first round games. So, those games went on as normal. It was very surreal, though, in the arena. I mean, it was not packed at all compared to, what the Big 12 championships typically are. I mean, I would say it was about 40% capacity, which
Oh, wow.
usually that place is, sold out. So you knew, it didn't feel normal. But then, we were thinking on Wednesday, wow, this is going to be really eerie, and teams are really going to have to, build their own sort of energy without anyone in this building. So then Thursday we woke up, it was around 10:45, and we had received an email, and all of us Big 12 staff, jumped on a call. And so we were told before the media and the fans were that our tournament, the rest of our championships for the men and women's basketball, were being canceled. And, at the time it was emotional. It was a really, a roller coaster of emotions. But I think, too, it was undoubtedly, we all knew it was the right decision with how quickly things were starting to turn in the country, and listening to, the news and seeing some of these things of, what it was doing in China, what it was doing in Italy. And, we as sports people who work in this profession, we didn't want to add to this problem at hand in our country. And so, I want to say thank you really to, all of the leaders in sports that came together to collectively make these decisions so really early on, before this spread got very bad in the country. So it was an interesting time, something I'll never forget. And I'm just happy that our student athletes and coaches and fans, are safe, and hopefully everyone's staying home right now and following the orders.
Do you remember what you were doing when the NBA postponed their season?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, there was a few of us together at the arena. We were at the Sprint Center watching practices. And I think at that time, I feel the NBA, I mean, they're such a great model of, in everything they do. As soon as that came down, you knew how is, if the NBA, these pro athletes that get paid to play sports, are not going to be out there playing. I knew it was going to be shocking if the NCAA and if we as the Big 12 didn't follow suit. I don't remember exactly what I was doing, but I remember we were all at the Sprint Center, and we all got that ESPN notification came through. And it was just kind of like this silent, surreal um, emotion that you're like, okay, well, that's when it felt really real. And that's when, I'm sure, for the student athletes, it felt real when, some of these NBA players started coming forward saying that they had it. So many of them that they look up to, I think it really hit home that this isn't just attacking, a certain type of people. It can get celebrities, it can hit pro athletes. So yeah, I mean, where were you when everything went down?
So I was in Vegas, and we actually were in the middle of a game. And I just remember it's like everybody's phones went off at the exact same time, because it was just like a complete swirl of information of like the NBA just postponed their season. Like had so many people ask me, they're like, we have to follow now, right? And I'm like, I have no idea what we're gonna do. Like, I wish I had answers, but like I'm focused on this game. But it seemed like every single hit I did for that game, because I do the sidelines for the WAC tournament,
Okay.
was about the coronavirus in some way,
Yeah, I
talking
mean,
about the Ivy League and how they suspended their seasons, and talking about the NBA. And then it was just like boom, 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 boom. I remember getting ready to go to bed that Wednesday night, and I was like, I don't even know if I want to go to bed, because so much news is continuing to break. And I remember seeing one tweet, and somebody put out a list from like 9 a.m. until like 11 p.m. of all the things that had happened that day. And there was some 20 something items on that list. And I was like, holy crap. And like, this is only the beginning.
right. Yeah, I mean, it's in just less than 48 hours, things went from everything being, normal in a sense. I mean, right, we were still taking precautions, we were still wiping things down, that, and had Lysol cans everywhere. They had Phillips 66 hand wipes for us when we got there. I mean, definitely that's not normal by any sense of the imagination in years prior. But it was, people weren't, wearing gloves or masks or anything like that, going to canceled 48 hours later. So yeah, it really took a turn quickly, and it was, like I said, it was the right decision, because at the end of the day, the student athlete and coaches' safety should be our number one priority, and is our number one priority. So um, yeah, it's a weird time though. I mean, without sports, and I think it's exercising our creativity though, and really testing us to get creative.
It's so true.
Mm.
When do you think sports will come back?
Oof, it's hard to say. I'm so optimistic, so I like to really hope and wish for the best. And I think by the end of, and this is just my prediction. I think by the end of July, maybe early August, we'll start maybe hopefully seeing some sort of action, whether that's the NBA potentially returning, or maybe, I mean, I know golf had just come out and said that the Masters is going to be played in November. So Augusta in November, I mean, that'll be gorgeous, but that's, a lot later than kind of what I'd be predicting. I don't know. It's so tough to say. I'm hopeful that, I guess it's end of July, early August, but that's, I guess, just my hopes, and realistic thought process. I mean, I wish it could be, ultimately next week, but
Right.
we all know that can not happen. So hopefully it's sooner than later, but I think the decisions that will be made with everyone's health and safety in mind. And it's amazing, all of these people that are really just taking in all of these information at the highest level and making these decisions, in the right way. And I think they deserve a lot of credit for, the hard work that's going on right now behind the scenes.
Yeah, I cannot agree more. And to all the healthcare workers too, I see videos of nurses and doctors, and I have one of my cousins is an ER doctor down in Austin, Texas,
Wow.
and he was trying to find a mask that he could wear. And so my boyfriend's family is in a small town in Kansas, and his dad, my boyfriend's dad, went to a local store in Kansas to see if they had any masks, and he got the last one. And they live in a
Wow.
very small town. So to like be the last one to get the mask and then ship it down to Austin, Texas, because they don't have any, my heart just breaks for all the medical care people in the world right now. I can't even imagine. We're all over here like, oh, we miss sports so much, but it's such a bigger picture.
Oh my gosh, yes. Like, it's those medical professionals right now are heroes, and the sacrifices that they're making to be away from their families, and just all these long hours I can't even imagine, and to risk their own health and safety, to protect others. I mean, they are the ultimate heroes right now in all of this. And it's World Health Worker Week, actually,
Is
announced.
it?
Yes. So yesterday it began, and to be honest, I'm not sure if this is something that happens every year, or if this is just specific to this year, with all that's going on. But there's like a hashtag WHW week, that's kind of going around. So I encourage people to really give their thanks and thoughts, and towards all health workers everywhere, because right now they are making the ultimate sacrifice to protect
That
the
is so
world.
true. Yeah, a
Yeah.
huge shout out to all of them. We are forever in debt to all of you who are putting your lives on the line. Let's move off the coronavirus. So let's
Yes,
try and keep this on a positive note going forward.
I agree.
Let's talk about your Jalen Hurts interview. Uh,
Yeah.
Big 12 championship, right? I mean,
Yes.
you just started over there at the Big 12. What was that experience like?
So it was my third day of work. Literally, I had just started that Thursday. The Big 12 championship for football was that Saturday in Dallas, AT&T Stadium, Oklahoma against Baylor. It was a game, for the ages. Such a great game, such an exciting atmosphere. That place was rocking, and for a little bit, you thought that Baylor had the chance to come and upset Oklahoma's season, and then the Sooners worked their magic, and so my first interview for the Big 12 was Jalen Hertz. Pretty surreal. You asked me if I get nervous for interviews. I would say like walking out onto the 50 in the middle of AT&T Stadium, surrounded by all of those fans, and then all of the media that just rushed the Oklahoma sideline, and then realizing like I was getting Jalen Hertz right after Holly Rowe finished with him for TV. That was a nerve-wracking moment for me, I would definitely say. And but he was great, and I'm excited to see what his future holds with the NFL draft here in just a few days, about a week away. So yes, that was definitely an unforgettable interview, an unforgettable moment, and hope to be part of more football post game interviews. Hopefully we have plenty of those this fall.
How interesting is it going to be for the NFL draft to be all over the phone?
Yeah, it's gonna be different. But I also think just it's so cool to see how far that technology has come, and that we have the ability to do these sort of virtual drafts. I wonder, I think it'll be interesting, and I would love, hopefully, to get some Big 12, players either before or after. It's my hopes to do some sort of interviews about just kind of how the process goes, and how different it is to kind of hear their insight on all of this. And definitely happy it's still able to take place, and these athletes are able to move on and hear their names called, although it'll be in a much different way. But it'll be, yeah, I guess, huge thanks to technology that we're able to do something like this.
It really is interesting just how far like we've come with technology. Because if you think about it, they are putting on full broadcast. Like ESPN right now is putting on a full broadcast, and everyone's at home.
Yeah,
And the
it's
picture looks good, the audio is clean. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like 10 years ago that could never have happened.
yeah, no, and I think I also don't think two people a month ago would have, or 2 months ago would have known. I think it's taken some creativity, and taken probably a few different tries of different things to get it right. But their dedication to serve sports fans everywhere. It hasn't stopped for them, and I'm trying to kind of have a similar mindset over here, and what can I still do that's remote from my home. And I have a pretty good setup with Zoom to be able to do interviews with student athletes and coaches that I was doing long before this actually had started. It was something I was doing at the Patriot League when I couldn't get to campus, of being able to do studio interviews while not being on campus. So I'm just trying to take that same sort of technology and apply it now just from my home.
Yeah, no, that's what we do because being in the WAC and it's in Denver, we have no schools around us. You
Right.
have to get on a plane to go to any of the schools in the conference. So we always do all of ours through Skype. And it's just funny now to have to like watch that happen in the national networks and such.
Right. Yeah. We're all, facing the same challenges, and same struggles, and making do with what we have.
Morgan, one of the main things that I love so much about watching your work is the way you speak, and you have such great pace when you do it. Uh, how did you get to that point? I am somebody who I want to spit out all my ideas very fast, and I talk very, very fast, and it's something that I continuously work on to slow down. So, what have you done to kind of help yourself with that great pace?
All right, first of all, don't be so hard on yourself. I think over this course of this call, you've been very eloquent in your pace and speaking.
Well, thank you.
But thank you for admiring, my delivery. And I think it's really come with a lot of practice, a lot of reps. I don't think I've ever been one to really speak too quickly. Maybe at first when I was first starting out and nervous. But I think, if anything, one of the things that I've actually been working on is to speed up my delivery at times. So, it's trying to not have this flat, monotone pace. But, if you bring a fact or you bring a big stat, to kind of emphasize that stat and then come with the rest of your information a little more quickly. So I think being able to have a variance in your pace is very, important, because that just makes you sound a little bit more engaging. And so, yeah, I think, but again, at the end of the day, it really just comes back to finding your voice as a broadcaster and what works for you. And I think a lot of the times I've had a few calls with young women during the stretch of this, stay-at-home quarantine period that have reached out to me asking for advice. One thing that I've told them to do that someone had told me years ago was to take a written piece, right? So if you read something on The Athletic or New York Times, whatever it may be, read that piece, read that story through, whatever it's on, sports or news, doesn't matter, and then, comprehend it, and then, write out bullets how you would write and talk for television. So you can take, a written piece of news and just pretend like you're reporting that news with those same facts. Do it in your mirror, do it with a GoPro or your iPhone camera or on your computer camera, and watch yourself back. Why did you like the way that you said something that you did there? Or maybe, why do you not like the way that you just sounded there? And I think, when you can watch yourself back, which is sometimes so hard to do when you start out as a young broadcaster, hearing your own voice, and still sometimes it's difficult for me to do. But I think that's really one way that's going to help you get a lot better. So I think with pace and delivery, you just really have to watch yourself back and find your voice and find what works for you.
Who told you that?
I can't remember. Actually, I think it was probably one of my professors at Mizzou. If I had to guess, it was probably one of my mentors, Kent Collins. He worked at the Missouri School of Journalism, and he's now since retired, but he is like a legend around there, and he still is involved, still lives in Columbia, Missouri. I think in one of our capstones, that was one of the things that he told us. So yeah, I mean, if whoever's listening that is wanting to go into this industry and is trying to improve their on-air voice, I think has to be one of the best, pieces of advice that I've gotten and done, because it's so easy. You can do it right now. That can be one of the things that if you're working on to improve yourself during this time of staying at home in quarantine, if you have a little bit of extra downtime, you use it to improve yourself.
It's so true. I actually got told that advice as well
Okay.
he works for Altitude TV. His name is Todd Romero. He covers the Nuggets out here in Denver, and he told me that. And so I was wondering if like
Nice.
there might be somehow like similarities, or if that's like info nowadays. Because when I was in school, nobody told me that,
No,
and I
right.
wish they would have. I wish we would have had like an assignment, quote unquote, where we had to like talk into a mirror and watch ourselves, and like, or into a camera, besides like extracurricular activities. I didn't have anything in school where I really had to do that unless I was doing it for like our school TV station.
Right. And I mean, at that point, like, you're live, you're doing it live. And really, it was, getting those reps without, you were doing it, but you weren't really getting practice where no one could see you and where you could mess up. And luckily, when we were students, we did have a little bit more of that flexibility to mess up and flub up when we were younger then. But yeah, I think that's such great advice. I love that you've heard it too from somewhere else. So yeah, we need to keep circulating that around for these up and coming broadcasters.
Definitely. So I actually had gotten some questions too from some students in school. And one of them is
Awesome.
what would be the best advice that you would have for somebody who's about to graduate this spring?
So I think for people graduating this spring,
Granted, this is a very interesting time too,
right.
because we
I
don't
was gonna
exactly know how the
say,
hiring's going to go.
in a normal year, yeah, I was just, if everything was normal, and if TV stations and digital jobs were hiring as normal, we'll say that. I think it's what I had said earlier about just applying for everything, because you may apply for one job, and you may get a little bit through the job interview process. They might not want you, but they might know someone that does. And so I think it's keeping in mind just how small this industry is. I think another thing that people can be doing, so we're in this April time frame, is just starting to build relationships, reach out to people that you like their work, and pick their brains. I mean, I think right now a lot of us that work in sports, while we are staying busy and working our jobs, we have a little bit more time than normal because I'm not traveling on the weekends like I normally would for work. So I've been home a lot more, and we do have more time. So reaching out and just asking for advice and starting to build relationships with people can help you down the career path, whether it's for your first job or your third job or fourth job. So I think those two things is applying for any jobs that you see, but also just, if you don't get those jobs, build the relationships with those hiring people, and then build relationships with, outside of the jobs that you're applying for as well.
That's what I was gonna say. Although this is like a very unfortunate time, a lot of people have free time right now, and a lot of people are looking for things to do. So reach out to people, just to set up a phone call, even to talk, like you mentioned, and then maybe in a couple of months you can send them your reel and be like, hey, like I'm just about to graduate. Is there any way you can check this out, see what I can do to get better, etc.
Yes, I would echo that 100%. I thought of one other thing too. We had talked earlier about, being always learning new things. So I think, during this time too, if you're not, for those that are still in college, for those that aren't as familiar with the Adobe editing suite, like whether it's After Effects, Premiere Pro, Photoshop, try and just do some YouTube tutorials. That's even what I've been doing in my time. I just built some new animated graphics for us for the Big 12. And if you had asked me a year ago if I, knew what I was doing in After Effects at the level that I'm doing it right now, I would have been shocked that, a year from now that I could be doing these things. So I've tried to teach myself some new tricks and some things off camera to make myself more well-rounded. So, for someone that wants to be a reporter, in your first job, you're still going to have to do a lot of editing. I'm in my third job and I'm still doing a lot of editing. So I think being familiar and comfortable with the Adobe suite, if you're not already, graduating seniors soon to be, definitely get familiar and comfortable with editing.
Well, Morgan, we've been on the call for now an hour, and I cannot thank you enough. I feel like we still didn't even touch on a lot of things that we had talked about, so I would love to have you on again in the near future, but I want to keep this relatively short for anybody who will be listening. But is there any way that people can reach out to you to answer questions, to have them, or have you look at their reels, etc.?
Yeah, definitely. First of all, thanks again so much, Rachel, for having me. This was so much fun.